Hello everybody, me again, and I am in Port Hudson, Louisiana at the Port Hudson National Cemetery. Port Hudson is about 20 miles north of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 120 miles south of Vicksburg. Port Hudson being the site of a 48-day siege of a fort or a port that was built on the banks of the Mississippi River by the Confederates to control access to the Mississippi River, which was and still is a very major thoroughfare, right? Large river, and they use it for, it's always been used for transporting goods and stuff like that. So there was a siege here on a fort that was sat on right on the banks of the Mississippi, and right here in southern Louisiana. So the Confederates wanted to maintain control of the Mississippi, which they were able to do for a small period of time. So this thing was, Mr. Lincoln also wanted control of the Mississippi, and because that states up north use Mississippi River or were using the Mississippi River to transport goods down to New Orleans, get on ships, and wind up in all around the world and other parts of the United States, and it was just a major economic, vein. So everybody, the two armies, figured out if you got control of the Mississippi, you can do a lot of things. If you lose control of the Mississippi, you're pretty much done. So there were states up north that were putting a lot of pressure on Lincoln to end the war. You're killing us. We can't get goods down to New Orleans, and we can't get anything from New Orleans back up here. So he had to put a stop to that, and he sent forces down here, got control of New Orleans. That was Mr. Admiral Farragut, U.S. Navy. Gained control of New Orleans, and then had to try to come over and gain control of Port Hudson, the fort that was built upon the riverbanks here. So now the river from here, I don't know, I'm going to put up a picture of the map. It's further away. So this cemetery sits close to where the fort was actually built in reality. So there's also a state historic site that's 5 miles from here. It actually sits further away from where the port was built and where the bulk of the fighting was going on. This cemetery sits closer than that state historic site. But the cemetery is, it's not just, there is another cemetery here, Louisiana National Cemetery, which is close to here. They administer and take care of the cemetery as well. But Port Hudson was initially set aside for those that fought and died at Port Hudson, if you were everybody but the Confederates, that is. So there's a lot of Union dead here, a lot of members of the U.S. colored troops, the Louisiana National Guard, I think they called them. They were some of the first black men to fight in uniform, and it was one of the first events where black men were allowed to come in, form troops, and to fight for the Union, to prove that they could be depended on, could be committed soldiers. And so there's a lot of them buried here. I've got some pictures. So this cemetery's been here since 1867. Although there were already Port Hudson soldiers that died at Port Hudson were already buried here before this became a national cemetery. So this has started out with burying those guys here. So very quiet here right now. I'm the only one. It's usually just me. this being a smaller cemetery. He's kind of out of the way. Kind of takes some doing to get back here and find it, but well, I did locate it, obviously. So I'm really down here for this. Really down here to work, but the road took me close to Port Hudson, so I had to come over here. We're at sun is going down, so we're not far from sunset. The main interest for me, though, is I have a great grandfather who is buried here in Port Hudson, along the riverbanks here somewhere. He's a great grandfather of mine up my mother's side of the family tree. So it goes from like if you're looking at a picture of the family tree on like ancestry.com, it goes to, you have to go up to my mom, her mother, her mother, her mother, her dad, his dad. That's the gentleman I'm talking about. So he's a great grandfather. His name was Joel W. Rhyne, Rhyne. He died at 20 years of age. He had enlisted in 1861 in Itawamba, Mississippi, into the 1st Mississippi Regiment, Company K, and entered as a private and then went on to become a 2nd lieutenant, but died here. He was fought for the Confederacy. He was inside the fort at Port Hudson. There were between 65 to 7,000 men that were inside Port Hudson with the Confederacy. They were, and then something like 10,000 Union soldiers on the outside that laid siege, that surrounded the port. They couldn't get them to come out, because it was so well established, the fort. They had built it, the Confederates had built it to almost impenetrable. And so all they could do was surround this fort here and starve them out, wait it out. And took 48 days. That's the longest siege in American history. Longest siege of a federal institution in American history happened right here at Port Hudson. But it took 48 days, and they couldn't get no food in or out, nothing like that, no weapons in or out. So they were, most of them arrived here in May, I believe, May of 1863. Yeah. And then with the first fighting starting like May 27th, when the Union Army showed up and tried to fight their way in, and that was unsuccessful. They lost like 2,000 men in that fight. And then just said, we ain't getting in, right? So they had to just wait it out. And then there was another push to try to force them out by gunfire and force their way into the fort, and they couldn't get in. So they sat outside the walls, and which were mostly earthworks, but it was very well built. And so anyway, my grandfather, he was one of the ones inside, but he was, so his Confederate military records show that he was wounded by gunshot on June 19th of 1863, and he died from his wounds July 3rd, 1863. So however long that was, 2-3 weeks later. But they couldn't get by July 3rd. They were so depleted on food and medicine, medical help. They, you know, if you were dealing with infection or whatever, or weren't dealing with infection, you probably would be if you were shot or hurt yourself or whatever happened. But it fell into such. You got to the point that they were actually eating. When they got ran out of food, they were eating mules, mule meat, horses, rats. So I'd read that they were boiling shoe leather for soup, to flavor the soup. Wow. So they were committed. They were not giving up the fort, but what they were doing was trying to keep the Union Army here from taking over the fort and moving north to Vicksburg to help Grant in the battle up at Vicksburg. So those that were in control here inside the fort, the Confederate leaders were had, his goal was keep them busy. Don't let them have the fort here and then move. Don't surrender here and let them move north. And so as long as that fight was going on up at Vicksburg, he was going to keep them busy and tied down here. But yeah, so July 3rd, I think they surrendered at Vicksburg. And then word got down here, of course, and I read an account of a gentleman that was survived inside Port Hudson, a Confederate. He was an officer, and he wrote in his diary that on July 3rd or July 4th, they were yelling from outside the fort at the guys of the Confederates inside the fort that they had surrendered at Vicksburg. They knew they were holding out because of Vicksburg. And so they started yelling at them, making a lot of noise. Hey, they've surrendered at Vicksburg. And they didn't buy it. They just thought it was another, you're lying. You'll say anything, right, to get us out of here. But so he wound up, say the general with, I think it was Banks, Nathaniel M. Banks, or Nathaniel P. Banks, had sent the official telegram or letter that came from Vicksburg had it sent inside the fort at Port Hudson. See for yourself, here it is, straight from Grant. And then once he saw that letter, that was proof enough. So they started making arrangements, and on I think July 7th, 6th or 7th, they officially surrendered the fort and laid down their arms, because at that point, the reason that we're here, there's no reason that we're here at this point. I mean, the Vicksburg's already surrendered. Then so we're not serving a purpose. So they surrendered at that point. But that was after 48 days, and then so less than a week before that is when my grandfather died, or they record that he died on July 3rd. Now that's in the official. I have a copy of those records. But anyway, so the Confederates are not buried here, inside this cemetery. They are buried. Most of them were buried in trenches where they died, and those that I don't know if they dug any of them up to reinter them elsewhere, but there is a Confederate cemetery here of some of those that died at Port Hudson. It sits on private property, and you cannot get access to it. Like, you can just drive in here, like I am now, and look around, but they don't tell you where that cemetery's at. I've not been able to find it. It's somewhere here in the area. And but I'd also read that you could get access to it if you have official business there, you're going to see somebody you know, and somebody I know may be buried there, for all I know. But I mean, he may be buried there, right? So, but I don't know that. I do know that he's buried here somewhere in this area. So, anyway, so I'm here to play taps for everybody that's here, and for my grandfather. Good news is, before he passed away, before he was killed, he married his wife, and they had one child. There was a letter. I have a copy of a letter that he wrote back home and to his wife, and he mentions his little boy, you know. So said something near the end of the letter about give the little man, beautiful little man, a kiss for me, something like that. But that was Joel Cornelius Rhyne, who's my great grandfather, and his only child. So lucky for me, right? If he had not consummated the marriage with his wife and had a child, the one child before he was killed here, I wouldn't be here. So I'm glad that he was able to get some things done, right? Do the deed, man. All right, so I'm gonna play tap so I can get out here. I gotta finish my drive over to Gulfport, Mississippi. That's where I'm headed. All right, guys, I'm gonna set this down. We're gonna do some recording. It's about 16, 17 minutes long so far. So separate video, I'll be with taps. There we go. Talk to y'all in just a minute.